And this could be a hot take too, so don't come at me. Hello, my name is Anna, and today I'm answering your social work related questions. If you don't know me, you may be wondering what my credentials are to even be able to talk about these kinds of things. I got my bachelor's of social work from the University of Alabama in 2021 with minors in Spanish and Human Development and Family Studies. And then I went straight to get my Master of Social Work from Fordham University, which I graduated from in May of 2022. I currently have just under 2 years of post-grad experience, the first 10 months of which I worked in a juvenile detention center and corrections and mental health in juvie. And then I transitioned to my current role where I work as a pediatric medical social worker, both in an ICU and in a step-down unit in a children's hospital. I also have made it my mission to kind of get social work out in the world, make content surrounding social work from back whenever I was a senior in my BSW program, all the way through my MSW program, all the way through all of my post-grad experience so far. And so I've gotten comfortable talking about these kinds of things, and ultimately just want to create a space for prospective social workers, social work students, baby social workers to come together and collaborate. Because I remember whenever I started going through school, I just couldn't find social work content, and I had lots of questions and I had lots of things I wondered about the life of a social worker, and since I couldn't find it, I decided to become it. So hello. That is me. If you missed asking a question for this video, make sure to turn your post notifications on because I posted over in the community tab asking for questions. And I also posted on my TikTok and on my Instagram, so both of those are options as well, but I will be doing more of these in the future, definitely, so follow me on those so that you can contribute in future videos. If you asked any questions that were non-social work related, I added them into a vlog recently. It's the vlog that's titled like how things are really going. I put the questions non-social work related into that one, so you don't miss those either. Last thing I'll say before actually getting into the content, the meat of the video, is that there will definitely be a lot of times through this video that I'm going to be citing back to previous videos that I've made on my channel. I'll include thumbnails as I can or titles, and I'll link the ones that I can down below. But if you want to learn more about any of these things, chances are I've probably talked about it at some point, and I will definitely answer the questions again as they keep coming. But it's different me talking now reflectively looking back to like my MSW program or something like that, when you have access to like myself as an MSW student 2 years ago answering some of the similar types of questions, you know. So it's kind of valuable, I feel like, to be able to go back to 2022 and be like, oh, how did Anna answer this then when she was actually a grad student going through grad school, or like right after post-grad, you know, those kinds of things, seeing how the perspective has changed. There's also lots of like social work educational videos that have gone very in depth on different topics on, so you can find that in the, I think it's social work educational videos playlist on my channel. That being said, I always think it's so interesting to see like what kind of categories will come out of the questions that I get asked. I always just like type all of the questions up in my notes app and then start sorting them based on what seems to make sense. And so our sections for today are going to be more just like social work general questions about the field, about likes and dislikes, that kind of thing. We'll move into medical social work specific questions, because obviously a lot of questions I got were medical social work specific, since that is what I do and people know that's what I do. And then we'll move into social work advice and social work student advice too. So starting on a fun note, what is your favorite part of the social work field? Something I love about the social work field is how versatile it is, and that I know and I feel confident in the fact that at any point, if I want to make some sort of career change, I can with my social work degree, and I can find jobs in so many vastly different places with my same social work degree. That being said, like right now, the versatility of the field isn't affecting me because I like my job and I want to stay where I'm at, but I feel like it is freeing to know that at any point in my life, I can do so many different things, and that feels really cool. So I guess it's like a personal favorite of the social work field, but some things I love about like social work in and of itself is I love how holistic social work is. The whole, it doesn't just look at individuals, it looks at individuals within their community and within the larger context of things. That just like is personally how I feel is the most accurate and the most compassionate when working with people, is to take the social work view of things. I love that social work focuses on empowerment. It focuses not just on like, I'm gonna make this change for someone. It's more so what barriers are between this person making the change that they want for themselves, and is there anything I can do to help lessen those barriers, to help navigate through those barriers so that this person can make the change that they are wanting to see for themselves. I love the strong ethical code that comes behind social work. Obviously there are unethical social workers in this world, but I feel like in general, the social work code of ethics and the field of social work's view on people that it's working with is super strong compared with other disciplines and other fields. Do you have any experience or advice regarding cooperations of social workers with psychologists in the workplace? Yes, I do. In my current job, everyone that I work with that's a coworker is a social worker with a social work degree and a social work license. In my previous job, it was more just like broadly mental health, and so there were a couple people with social work degrees, there were a couple people with clinical mental health degrees. There were a couple LPCs, and I worked under a psychologist. Like, a psychologist was my supervisor. Working interdisciplinarily like that whenever you're a social worker, I think sometimes it can become obvious the way that social work varies from different similar fields. For example, in social work, we learn about abnormal psychology, we take psychology classes, we learn about working one-on-one with people, but we also learn that like that's not the whole picture, and that like the pathology of someone's brain also has a lot of other external factors that affect the person's experience in this world as well. And I think that sometimes differences arise there whenever you're working with people who received a different education, received a different training, maybe a different like personal beliefs in of themselves too. But that being said, many times lots of disciplines, whenever you're working interdisciplinarily like that, have a similar goal and have a shared interest in the benefit of the client. Sometimes it's just different routes to get there, and so it can be really valuable working with a social work point of view combined with a psychologist point of view, combined with a psychiatric point of view, combined with a clinical mental health point of view. Like, everyone brings something to the table, and I guess you just kind of start to distinguish and start to suss out where the social work line is versus where like other disciplines differ. Are there any classes you took during undergrad or grad school that you thought wouldn't be applicable but have become useful now? I would say by the time I got to grad school, most of the classes I took I felt would be applicable. That's also because I got to pick a lot of the classes that I was going to take, and so I picked ones that I felt would be applicable. But I always think it is shocking how much the community macro policy classes that you take in social work will become relevant even if you are working as a micro social worker, working one-on-one with people. I don't know if I always had like appreciation for my social work policy classes. Like, I thought they were interesting, but I didn't really think that they would necessarily come into effect where I was wanting to work, and they definitely do. Just like understanding how policy works, both at a government level, but then also policies within like an institution that you're working in, understanding how those policies work and also how you can analyze those policies and advocate for your clients to make policies better and make them work better for you is always something that I don't think you necessarily know how relevant that will be if you're planning on working like individual and in micro social work. And then I've also heard too, going the same way the other direction, like for people who want to be macro social workers, that a lot of their micro social work, more individual group classes will help them, because having the same soft skills of like empathy, active listening, reflection, those kinds of things can be helpful just when you're interacting with the people that you're interacting with, even if you're working at a macro scale. So I guess you can just see your classes for social work being as like adding little tools to your toolbox, you know, like, oh, there's the screwdriver, there's the hammer. Oh, I don't know if I'm ever gonna need this wrench, but it's still in my toolbox for if I do need it. And lots of times you will need it at some point, even if it's not as often as Mr. Screwdriver, you're still gonna need it. How do you track hours for your LCSW? I have a little piece of paper. I have a piece of paper for each person that I'm receiving supervision from, because I'm receiving individual supervision, and then I have two different group supervisions that don't occur as often but still sometimes occur. So I have a different piece of paper for each of those LCSWs that I'm receiving supervision under, and each time after we do supervision, I just write the date, I write the amount of hours, do like a brief what was discussed, and then there's a space for like my initials and my supervisor's initials. And so that way, then with all my 3 pieces of paper, as I have them adding up, I can keep track of how many hours I get. This is gonna be embarrassing what's wrong, but I'm pretty sure in Georgia I need 120 hours, and I can't receive more than 4 hours a month, and at least half of my hours have to be from an LCSW. So I did receive supervision hours at my previous job, 2 through the psychologist who I was already talking about recently. I just wouldn't have been able to get more than half of my hours through her. I forget how many I came with though. I'm making good progress though. Like I'm on track, which is nice. And my current job offers the supervision just as a part of it, which is a hugely wonderful, beneficial perk. What are some other areas of social work you would like to work in one day, / will you ever do school social work? I would love to do school social work. My BSW internship was in an elementary school. At that time, I was like, school social work is it. I am doing school social work. It became a little bit different though, because in Alabama, you could become a school social worker with just your BSW. At the time that I was interning there, I just wasn't staying in Alabama. And so whenever I moved to Georgia, I didn't know that like there can be different regulations for different states. And in Georgia, you very much need like your MSW, if not your LMSW, to become a school social worker. And so it wouldn't really have become an option for me until later. Whenever I was changing my job around this time last year, I did apply to several school districts and I never heard back from any of them. So it's definitely not, I don't know what word I'm going for. It's not out of the picture. Like I definitely really enjoy school social work, have a lot of respect for school social workers. It just isn't where I'm at right now. And it's hard to be like, oh, I'll never make the transition into school social work, but just like, since I'm really liking where I'm at now, it would take something big, I feel like, for me to be ready to change where I'm at. But thinking just in more general of other areas of the field of social work that maybe I would like to be in the future. Obviously we got schools. I do think it'd be fun to move up to a supervisory role at some point in my life. I'm 24. I'm not supervising anyone right now, but like whenever I do have the experience and the knowledge base to where I could be good at that, I do think that that could be something that I like. I mean, I like pouring into social workers, hello. And it could be fun to incorporate that into like my actual professional role too. I loved working in the justice, well, okay, I didn't love working in the justice system. I loved who I worked with when I was working in the justice system. And so juvenile justice has been something that's just so close to my heart ever since then. And so I don't know if I would ever do work again there, or if I would ever like volunteer there or something like that. But I mean, that's an area of the field that I'm definitely very interested in. I don't see myself ever doing private practice. I don't see myself ever becoming a therapist, just based on like things I like to do and don't like to do at this point in my life. Part of me always holds out on like sometime I could go macro, have this like fun little work from home job where I'm doing something in the macro world of social work, but we'll see. I'm content where I'm at right now. What is one thing you dislike about the field of social work? That something I get tired of is people outside the field of social work having lots of misunderstandings about what social work is and what social work isn't. Obviously, the change that I can make about that is just educating people as I can as it comes up throughout my life, and continuing to make videos like this that like bring more accurate view of social work into this world. Obviously, the people that watch these videos though are ones that probably already know something and like it at least a little bit to be interested. I just feel like that's something I get tired of. It's like people making assumptions about me and the work that I do, and me being like, that's not even like, that's not what I went to school for. That's not who I am. But I guess that's like not a dislike about the field of social work. That's just like a dislike about me as a social worker. The field of social work has got to figure itself out about licensing and the differences between states. Like that, it is ridiculous how different social work is among the 50 states when it shouldn't be. Something that's like personally good for me is that Georgia has one of the hardest get your LCSW requirements. And so like if I ever were to move to a different state, when I get my LCSW in Georgia, then like I'll have met the requirements for most every other state. But it is ridiculous that like some people can have 15 years of experience independently working as an LCSW in like Maine or something, come to Georgia and not be able to have their clinical license and have to go get more hours of supervision before they can get their clinical license in Georgia. Like even if everyone were to have Georgia's number of supervision hours, like it should just be uniform across the board. It is ridiculous that it's not. And so, I mean, keep yourself educated. I'm not too up-to-date educated on it, but I do know that the NASW is working on an interstate compact, which would help alleviate some of those differences, being that states that would sign on for the interstate compact, if you would get your license in one of those, you could get your license in any of the other ones in the interstate compact, or maybe just be the same license. It'd be like the compact license that would count for all of those states. It is just so silly how different it is state to state. Even in the fact, like how I was mentioning earlier, in Alabama, you could become a school social worker with your BSW. In Georgia, you need an LMSW and a school social work certification before you can even apply to become a school social worker. So it's like, whichever one of those we're gonna pick, why can't we just like pick it? Because it's weird. How do you keep yourself motivated and avoid burnout? Years and years of work. If you ever find the urge in yourself to go back to the beginning of my channel and watch your way up till present time, you will see, I feel like, so many changes and a lot of growth happen in motivation and avoiding burnout. You'll also see a lot of other things going on. My frontal lobe is still developing. It is not 100% yet. And by being on the internet, you get to watch it happen. No, but I think that a huge thing for me is realizing that my work is not my whole identity and is not my whole life. And that if at any point my work is my whole identity and is my whole life, I'm crushed. Like I can't live in that way. I think through school and through like becoming a social worker, it was like, this is my thing. This is what I'm working towards. And so then whenever you start to work so many hours a week and you're just like investing yourself in clients and investing yourself in your work, it's like that's not inherently bad, but it's not sustainable. And I mean, you watched it not be sustainable this time last year whenever I crashed and burned and had to quit. What I will repeat as many times as you need to hear it, and last time I said it in a video, people were commenting and were being like, I really needed to hear that, so look, you've boosted me up, let me say it again. You do not have to have social work be your whole life in order to be a good social worker. You can be a great social worker from 9 to 5 and then have nothing to do with social work after 5 p.m. and that is perfectly a-okay and is more sustainable for your career. I feel like the big words we gotta be focusing on are sustainable and resiliency. Doing things that increase your resiliency or make it easier to be resilient, and doing things that are sustainable for your career. And by sustainable for your career, I mean meaning like make your career be sustainable for your life so that you can live your life and find joy and be happy and be peaceful and take rest and have great connections with great people around you and do things that you find fun. If those things are your focus, then your career can take its career hours throughout the day, but like your life is your focus. You're just doing your career in order to live your life. Gotta get that check so that you can live the rest of your life. Whenever you're in a helping profession, it becomes very quick for people to be like, this is my passion project. This is the purpose that I am on this earth for. I need to give everything of myself. I need to become this little martyr for this work because it's great work that I'm doing. And yes, doing social work is great work, and it can make differences in people's lives, and it can make differences in this world, and it can do that in your 9 to 5 hours, and that is good. Just like any other job, it is a job. I think for me, having that kind of mindset is what has helped me stay motivated and prevent burnout. Moving into medical social work related questions. How did you apply for your medical social work position? / did you get a paid internship at a hospital? When I was applying to jobs at this time last year, I did not necessarily want to become a medical social worker. To me, a hospital just felt drab. It just felt dreary. It felt like clerical work. It felt like not something that I wanted to do. I don't know why it felt like that. I was not interested in a hospital. However, what are there in every region that you are ever living in? There are hospitals around. And when I was looking to find a job, I was like, I know that a hospital will at least be an option if I need a job, even if it's just like to bridge the gap until I get a job that I like better. And so that's why like hospitals were kind of on my radar, but they were like 5th on the list. I had schools up here. I don't even remember what else. And then I had like hospitals 5th on the list. And I had on my big whiteboard, I listed out like every hospital system in the area, because I was like, I'll just look at what social work jobs they have around in case I need to apply for that. And in doing that, I learned about a job fair that my current job was having back then. Actually, there were 2 different hospitals that were having job fairs on the same day. And so in my head, I was like, I'm gonna go to both of these job fairs. And I was planning on that in a sense of like to practice for interviews and to practice like giving my elevator pitch and answering questions and to increase my confidence and to push myself out of my comfort zone. I was not planning on going to those job fairs in order to like get a job. I truly was like, I want to push myself out of my comfort zone so that my comfort zone can feel stronger and wider whenever I'm actually going for jobs that I actually want. That being said, I went to the job fair for my now current job, met my now current manager, and I like fell in love with the job as she was describing it. And I remember being so disappointed when I was leaving this job fair because I was like, well, now I'm excited. Now I want this job. And I was like, but I'm not gonna be able to get it. And so I'm just like setting myself up for letdown. And that's honestly because where I work now is hard to get your foot in the door. And that's what I've heard from lots of people. It's very hard to get your foot in the door. It's very hard to get your resume looked at. There are lots of people that apply because they want to work for this institution more so than like specifically wanting the job that they're applying for, you know what I mean? Which just makes it be hard to get a job. The job fair is how I got my current job because like I said, I sat down with who is now my current manager and talked for like 30 minutes, and I had questions about the job that were like real genuine questions because I really didn't know what a day-to-day would look like in the hospital, in the medical field. She answered all my questions, and then it was just happenstance because there was 3 different admin people sitting at this table whenever I showed up at the job fair, and it was like the person in front of me got up and left my now manager sitting there. So she's like, oh, like, do you want to come sit down? So I was like, yeah, sounds good. And I just can't imagine like how different it would have gone if someone else finished their conversation first and I went to someone else, you know what I mean? But so apparently what I've heard since is that I made a great impression at that job fair, and there were 2 openings under my manager that weren't even open yet, but were going to be opening up in the next few weeks after that job fair. And so she was like, I will let you know when those open up. I want you to apply for them, and I want you to let me know like after you've applied. And so we did that, and then I had a 3 interview process, I guess 4 if you kind of count the job fair a little bit. I did not go to the second job fair that day. I felt drained. I felt done after the first one. But so I did the job fair. After a few weeks, then I did an interview that was with the like team leads of social works at my location. So it was like a panel interview of like 5 of them, I think. And then a couple weeks after that, I did a peer interview where I met my like now coworkers. And then a couple weeks after that, I did a medical team interview where I got to meet lots of different people on the interdisciplinary team who also interviewed me. And it was after that step is then when I got my job offer. So it was long. Overall, it was 3 months between whenever I went to that job fair and when I started the job. It was a long process and it took a lot of dedication. And there was a part of me that wanted to stop because I was like, 3 interviews is crazy. I was like, why am I still spending my time interviewing whenever like I could just be working? But overall, that is how I got my current job. Oh, I guess the detail I left out, there was 2 openings under my manager. When I went to the first interview, I still didn't know like which of those 2 I wanted to pursue, and I was like, honestly, you know those positions better than I do, and you know like now me from whenever we've talked. So I was like, honestly, whichever position you think that I'm better suited for, better fit for, I am happy to pursue that one. And so that's how then I pursued my cardiac position within the hospital and ended up on the specialized floor that I'm at now. That honestly, I do think it was a really good fit. So she knew. Oh, and then the last part of that, did you get a paid internship at a hospital? I had absolutely no medical experience at all before this job interview, this job fair. My first internship experience was at the elementary school. My second internship experience was at the juvenile detention center. Neither of those were paid. I like had been to a hospital maybe 3 times in my life, and one of those times was when I was born. So I had no hospital experience at all. What advice do you have for social workers applying to pediatric hospitals? I think my best piece of advice is to have a reason for why you want to be in the area that you are applying for. Even within pediatric hospitals, there's so many different specialties, whether it's gen peds, or if it's cardiac, or if it's the PICU, or if it's the NICU, or if it's like an outpatient clinic type role, because there are clinics at hospitals that people will come in and out of, whether it's oncology, wherever you end up applying to or end up landing, have some sort of reason of why you want to be in that specific niche, because I think that can be very marketable and can make you very competitive as you're applying. Or even just being honest about like why it interests you, because obviously I just talked about like whenever I was in my interview, I didn't know where I wanted to be and why I wanted to be there. But as I learned more, I was able to be like, okay, this part of this job description really interests me and is like a part that I really want to do in this world as my work. For pediatric hospitals, you are working with parents. You're not necessarily working with kids. Obviously kids are around, but you're mostly working with parents, and so you do handle a lot of things like legal guardianship, custody, visitation, child protection. Obviously the like follow-up of child protection, it's not just making reports, it's then like following the investigation, doing what you need to do to support as a hospital. It's things like working with parents about their leave from their employment, working with parents to get resources that maybe are available to them that can be helpful for them while their child is hospitalized, being a supportive presence with parents as their kid is sick. Like nobody wants to be at a pediatric hospital. Nobody wants any kind of reason to go there, but obviously whoever you're working with is there for some sort of reason. And so being able to help them navigate the hospital and try to take away the stresses that you are able to take away from, just to make their experience just the eensy-weensy littlest bit better. What are some key concepts / key medical terminology social workers need to be familiar with when working on an interdisciplinary team? I'm gonna give you like zones of vocab more than like give the actual vocab. Social workers need to be familiar with insurance, whether private insurance, marketplace insurance, or public insurance. These are things that you can learn as you start to work. Don't worry, because so many of these things, I had no idea what I was doing when I walked in the door. But like Medicaid, Medicare, gotta start knowing those types of things. Gotta be familiar, I guess it depends on where you're working in the medical field, because maybe some people don't have to be familiar with this. Gotta be at least somewhat familiar with end of life related aspect of medicine, whether that's like legal documents like DNRs, posts, making decisions around withdrawing care, who gets to make those decisions. Now obviously with anything like medicine related, it's doctors that are doing that, but understanding like supporting family and like finding clarification of who gets to make decisions and then supporting those people as they need support. End of life is it's a big one. It's hard to say specific diagnoses or medicines or treatments to be familiar with, because it'll depend so much on which area of the field that you are in. But for example, being in cardiac, a lot of babies come in with congenital heart defects, and so a lot of it's just come by exposure. But now I have a very general understanding of a lot of different congenital heart defects and a lot of different cardiothoracic surgeries and a lot of different medications that kids take and a lot of different procedures and all of these things that I never thought that I would know, but just like in being around, in being present for medical conversations with families, and then also in like taking the initiative to look things up whenever I don't know what it means. I've gotten a very general grasp of cardiology, honestly, just enough to like understand what's going on. Obviously, you should never explain medical things to family, because there are people that are much more qualified to do that and it's out of our scope as social workers. But being able to have like a general understanding of what's going on and what it means for the people who it's going on for is very beneficial. But obviously that will be different depending on which area of a hospital or of a clinic that you are in, because they can be so different. Positives and negatives in medical social work. Positives, it pays well in the social work field. It is one of the highest paying areas of the field. Positives, it usually is very structured in like a hierarchical, there's a social work supervisor, there's a social work director, you're under them. Like it's very whereas not every job is like that. So it's kind of depends on if that's a positive or a negative for you. I like structure. I do like structure. It's obviously different that versus if you're like part of a startup nonprofit or something where roles are still being formed and morphed and is more flexible. Hospitals for the most part are pretty regimented. Oftentimes you have a regular schedule as a hospital social worker. This can look different among hospitals and among social workers. For example, for me, we have like regular full-time social workers, of which I am one, that work business hours during the week. And then there are also evening, overnight, and weekend social workers who obviously chose to be evening, overnight, or weekend social workers. So there is flexibility in the schedule in that way, but not flexibility like in myself where I ever have to stay overnight or anything like that. Like my schedule is what it is, and anything that needs to get done in an evening hour when I'm not there gets done by someone who is there in that evening hour. That being said, some hospitals have their social workers do 410s, like 10 hours, 4 days a week. Some social workers in hospitals do 312s, like nurses, similar to that schedule of 12 hours, 3 days a week. It really just depends. I think the ED tends to be one that has like a lot of more flexible schedules like that, in that it's providing coverage. So like it truly may have social workers who are there 12 hours a day, and then it goes to the next 12 hours, and then you again, and then, you know, that kind of thing. Negatives of medical social work, really having to think here. I guess just that like healthcare is interesting. Healthcare can be somewhat fun, like in people who are making it be more fun, like for kids or anything, or bringing more enjoyment to the hospitals. And with that, as a social worker in a medical field, you're often dealing with a lot of the things that other people don't want to be dealing with, like fighting insurance battles. No one ever wants to have a reason to make a child protection report. You know, you never want that situation to be around. Having tough conversations with family members, fighting against like systems with a lot of barriers that just like don't offer enough support to families. Macro level wide. Those are the things that you like handle and that you deal with. So it's not like an easy job. It can be a good setting, but you're doing hard things. I feel like this could be a hot take too. I don't know. This is like not my job description, so don't come at me. Sometimes I feel like my role a little bit is to like be a thorn in someone's side until my advocacy works. Because obviously like it is within my job description to like advocate for patients and advocate for families. But being a social worker at a hospital doesn't mean that like I walk into a room and people listen to me. Kind of have to, like I said, be a thorn in someone's side until I'm able to successfully advocate and get the things that are needed for my patients and their families. So whether that's a positive or a negative, sometimes it's fun to be a thorn. Sometimes it's not fun to be a thorn. Any advice for someone currently going to school for medical social work? I think something that's not often discussed is the fact that like medical social work is a generalist social work position. And so almost everything that you learn in school maybe could be relevant in your future job as a medical social worker. What I mean by that is that I work with public benefits, I work with the government, I work with child protection, I work with homelessness, I work with employment, I work with financial assistance, I work with food resources, I work with like clothing and baby item resources. I work in creating spaces where like families and medical teams can have honest, communicative conversations in a safe place. Sometimes I get involved, not involved, but like sometimes family conflicts become something that then becomes part of my work whenever it affects a child. Sometimes I work with like immigration and refugee things. I work with whatever the families of the children that are coming into the hospital are bringing to me. And now that doesn't mean that I'm like working with the government on someone's refugee status, but that does mean like if someone is a refugee and that is affecting like their child's care for whatever reason that is, whether they're working on getting a job, whether they're working with a language barrier, any of those things, it's like that does start to become my business, even if it is then like referring out to other community agencies and then working with those community agencies to partner in supporting a family so that they can support the care of their child. If someone has very low resources, I personally don't have like resources that I can give them. I'm not in that area of social work, but I can work with community agencies and foundations and resources that are available with them and work to connect families to the correct resource and steward those well. So like anything that you learn in school could possibly become relevant in your job as a medical social worker, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Which maybe could like lighten some pressure for yourself, because if there's a class that you're like, this sounds so interesting, but I don't know if it'll help me as a medical social worker, take it. It probably will. Is being a medical social worker stressful? Is the profession respected in healthcare? It can be stressful. To me personally, which is gonna be different person to person to person, to me personally, it is easier for me to leave work at work working as a medical social worker than it was whenever I was working in juvenile detention. situation. I think part of that being is that the things I am dealing with in the hospital, I know whenever I go home at night, those people and families are still being taken care of. Now, that doesn't mean that like bad things never happen overnight at hospitals. It does, but it's easier for me to live my life outside of my hours of work and then come back and be the best that I can for the people that I'm working with in my hours of work, compared to whenever I was working at juvie and I didn't know if I would like come in the morning and have my clients all of them beaten up in the rooms. That made it harder to leave work at work. Is the profession respected? I would say no, but that doesn't like affect my experience of it. Kind of like how I was talking about being a thorn in people's sides. I feel like almost everyone in the hospital prefers for there to not be situations in which social work has to get involved in. You know how we were talking about social work does the hard things? It's easier on everyone, the child, the family, the doctors, anyone, if it's a situation where social work does not have to be heavily involved. But that obviously is not always the case. And so then here, you know, comes waltzing in Anna and it's like, oh, dang it. Just kidding. No one's ever said that, but like, you know what I mean vibes wise? Like, I know the work that social work does in a hospital is important. Lots of people in the hospital also know that the work that social work does is important. And there are also people in the hospital that don't have the same views or just like don't think about social workers at all, which is fine, but I definitely would not say we're respected, but I don't think that makes us any less important. And it doesn't affect my experience of the day. Alrighty, last little section. Now that we're really getting going, I feel like my energy increases the longer I talk. Social work advice. Tips for students starting their BSW. Watch my video that I made for social work majors and students getting their BSW. I don't remember now, but whenever I made that video, I did remember, so I'm sure I have better advice in there than I do now. Any advice for social work students looking in the field of court/corrections instead of healthcare? Look, you found like the intersection of me. If it's possible for you to get an internship in the more corrections, court, juvenile, I guess you didn't say juvenile, it's me inserting myself, in the more court corrections area of things, that could be a wonderful, wonderful learning experience. Don't worry if you can't. I feel like sometimes those internships are hard to come by, and obviously I'm living proof that you can do something entirely different than what your internships were. But I do think that if you can get any kind of experience, even if it is volunteering or shadowing, it could be really beneficial, because then you could get like a more informed look into what social workers are doing in the area that you want to work in. Same thing I was saying earlier with people in school wanting to be medical social workers. You never know what kinds of classes will actually end up being beneficial for you. So I mean, feel free to take whichever classes you're interested in, you feel passionate about, because likely you will learn things in them that will be beneficial to you in a court system. We're so multifaceted. I think something also to know is that court systems are so different, not even just state to state, but county to county. And so the opportunities that social workers have in one court system may be very, very different than the opportunities that a social worker has in another court system or another corrections agency, corrections system. If you're looking to be in corrections, there are county jails. Every county has a jail, or it's even if it's like a cell in a police officer's basement. For the most part, every county has a jail. And then there's also prison, which is the Department of Corrections that people go to after they get sentenced to their time. So it's very different working in like county jails where people are waiting for their trial. They may be in and out overnight, versus prison, which means like you've been sentenced and you are serving your time. Within corrections like that, there will likely be job opportunities actually working for the governments that are running those incarcerations, but there will also be job opportunities in like agencies that contract into those facilities, or like organizations that run groups inside of prison, you know, or that kind of thing. You can also look for like those and see what's going on in that sector to kind of expand your bubble of where you're looking for jobs, because there are lots of like very different opportunities even within corrections and the court system. What are your tips and tricks for the LMSW? Watch my video where I took the LMSW and told you my tips and tricks about it, because again, I knew what I was talking about when I made that video and I just like don't quite remember now. I got my LMSW October 3rd of 2022. We're in a renewal year, so I'm about to have to be renewing my LMSW. What are your tips to prepare for an MSW program / how is the workload in your MSW program? Preparing for, honestly, probably grad school in any sense of the word, but obviously the grad school that I know is my MSW program. I think it is important to find an organizational system that works for you. Lots of times grad school will be that you have these required readings, you have papers that you're working on, you have classes you're attending, and then you may have like other little projects going on at the same time. So it can just be like a lot going on at once. And so finding some sort of organizational system that works for you can be so crucial in your success. What I did, and I can put pictures of it up on the screen. I had a Google Doc for every session of classes that I was in, and you can see that I separated it out by unit, and I wrote down every single thing I needed to do each unit. Obviously what you're seeing now is a finished version because I am finished with grad school, but basically all of this started white, and I would start doing a strike through as I finished things, as I was progressing through a unit, and then once a box got entirely done, entirely struck through, that's when I would turn it the color, so I could like see my progress then moving through the entire class. And then you can also see that I kept like a breakdown of my grade. All of this was found from the syllabus, so it took like front end work after getting a syllabus to set this up, but I would keep the grade there, so then as I also like progressed through the class and I got points for things and everything, so I could kind of just like keep track of how things were going. I guess I never finished putting in my final grade for this one. I hope it was good. I graduated, that's what matters. That being said, my workload, well, I guess first, these are helpful videos for you. My workload, you'll have been able to see through vlogs as I did it through my MSW, but from what I remember, it could be a little different compared to in-person MSW classes because mine was online. But mine included required readings, required like watched videos throughout the week, required synchronous sessions like Zoom classes to watch, to participate in, and then also like papers, projects. Some were group projects, some were role plays, some were more like reflection journal type papers. The workload was a lot, I'm not even gonna lie to you. It was a lot, but it also was just like my grad school grind era, and once you graduate and then you're done, and you can work and be like, oh my gosh, I have all this extra free time, now I don't know what to do with it. I do think the first-hand experience watching through previous videos will probably be helpful for you. Overall though, you've got this. Like even if it is a lot of work, you've got this. You're learning what you want to learn. You're becoming a better social worker every single day, becoming a more informed social worker, becoming a more experienced social worker. Every day you get closer to your graduation, and so you're doing great. How do you deal with imposter syndrome as an MSW intern? Remember, you're an intern. You're not supposed to be a social worker with 20 years of experience. Your internship took you on knowing that you are an intern. If other people seem like they know more than you, yeah, they probably do at this point, but that doesn't mean that you're never gonna get there. You're just still in your ABC step, whereas some other people might be in their LMNOP step. You know, and then some people are all the way to Z already. It's hard to not be great at something. Everyone has a period where they're not great at something. Every person that you're working with had a time when they know exactly as much as you know now. So feeling like you don't know as much, or feeling like you're not quite as comfortable or not quite as experienced as the people that you are around as when you are an intern, is because that is probably true, but that doesn't make you bad. That does not make you a lesser social worker, and it does not mean that you'll never get to the place where you see other people being. Also with that, give yourself credit for what you do know and what you do bring to the table. There are lots of things that you do know and lots of things that you do bring to the table. And if someone is going to be the most successful, most improved MSW intern, then why shouldn't it be you? You've got this. Do you have any advice for anyone wanting to get an MSW who is not majoring in social work? Yes, lots of people get MSWs without having a social work major, so don't feel like you're alone in that. There are also obviously lots of people that have a social work major and then go on for their MSW, but it is not the majority, I would even say. Lots of people make even like full career changes before heading into social work. So you're not alone, you're not weird for that. I honestly think it can be really beneficial because whatever your major is before you get your MSW, that makes you different than the other people in your class. That makes you have different background knowledge and different perspective. Even if it is something that feels entirely unrelated from social work, it can relate some way, and you are bringing a different flavor of value to the table by having a bachelor's degree in something else and then becoming a social worker. That's not to say there's not value in like the BSW to MSW pipeline. There obviously isn't that too, but no matter what your major was, you can use that knowledge, and it's incredible. It really is. I think it's boring having people in a room that are only have social work knowledge, just bouncing off social work knowledge. It's important to have other knowledge too, because social work is working in this big wide world with all sorts of different people, and so that includes so many different things that people can also major in and then bring that knowledge to their social work job. If you have questions specifically about like applying for an MSW and selling yourself, even if you don't have social work experience, not to refer you to a video, watch this video with Michelle from MSW Helper, because she gives a lot of really great tips on selling yourself when you don't have direct social work experience but are wanting to get an MSW. All of that being said, I hope you learned a little something today. I enjoyed spending time with you. I always love doing these. I feel like I start, my volume just like gradually increases as we go on. My unhingedness probably does too. I feel like I kept it together pretty well this time. Subscribe before you go. Share this video with your best social work friends. And if you've made it to this point of the video, comment this emoji so I know who the real ones are. I love you so much, and I will see you next time.